lounging, son.
Welcome back to Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan.
And this is Manny.
And we are back talking some more Mark Millar comics. We're talking Wanted today, which is a book that I have not read since I realized I haven't read it since it came out originally, which is crazy to me to think about because I remember this book as if I've read it multiple times. Like
That's
there's a
funny
little
you mentioned that. I had the same experience because I haven't read it since maybe it first came out, maybe shortly afterward, but like a lot of it was still very vivid in my head.
Yeah, like there was little bits and pieces, like I think you messaged me, you say you didn't remember how nihilistic it was, and I think maybe that I didn't remember. I was like, oh man, this book's fucking really fucking dark, like it's really like it goes hard, and I don't really remember a lot of Mark's stuff being that way. His other stuff, like I know he has like a dark sense of humor, but this one is like probably, in my opinion, one of the darkest stories that he's wrote.
It is, man. I mean, and like just everything about it, the theme, like like the character development, it all points towards like a bad guy, a bad character. It's interesting, especially like when you now having read it again, and I mean, obviously we're gonna spoil a lot of shit, but like that last panel, I think is very indicative of like what the series is almost trying to be. It's I think there's a reason it's so nihilistic. I think that like I don't know. We'll keep talking about it, and maybe my idea will formulate a little better. But now you look at the panel, right?
Yeah, I was looking at the panel because I kind of remember, but I didn't remember what the caption said. Yeah, but so anyways, we should probably mention the great JG Jones is on art and Paul Mounts is on colors. This is I gotta take
it's a gorgeous looking book, man.
Yeah, and it's it's funny because first of all, it opens up briefly where we talk about who will be the main character with Wesley Gibson, right? And you see just what a fucking loser this dude is.
Yeah. For those of you not familiar with it, Wanted, it was made into a movie with James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie as Fox, and the movie was a pretty big hit, so it kind of permeated the popular culture, but the actual comic Wanted is basically the same plot, but it does lean very heavily into like the comic book aspect of it. So, there's like a lot of amalgamations for like other well-known comic characters. Like,
well, the difference is it's not a guild of assassins. It's I don't want to call it a guild, but it's a fraternity of supervillains. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where it differs, and I kind of wish they would have just leaned into the supervillain thing. But I feel like
I do too.
Comic book movies weren't as like if
it
they
would
made
work now.
Yes, if they made Wanted now, I guarantee you they would have just gone with the supervillain theme. But Wesley is such a fucking loser.
And you were saying, and then it does open up. I mean, I think right from the beginning.
But the opening caption is like, you would think this is our main character, but it's not. It's his best friend having sex with his girlfriend over an IKEA table he picked up for a really good price. Like that's the first caption of the book, and then you just see like how much like he knows his girlfriend's cheating on him. He still goes to dinner with his friend, the one that's fucking his girl, and he's in a shitty job that he fucking hates. His boss doesn't fucking like him, and I think Mark does such a great job in those 3 pages. Really, it's page 2 and 3, but in the first opening pages of telling you who Wesley is, giving you just enough to like not feel sorry for him, but like you're just like, man, what a fucking pathetic dude,
Yeah.
And then you jump to, another major player in the book, the killer, and his dialogue is just I don't really want to read all his dialogue because it's like
there's things in this book that I think like might trigger or offend some people, so keep that in mind going into, this was written, over a decade ago.
A lot of shit I don't know if it would fly as much, but it's funny because I don't even know that. Like, I'm trying to look like it was published by Top Cow back in the day.
So, it was. I remember that vividly, and like for as profane and as transgressive and as like dark as it is, nobody really mentioned any of that when it first came out. I mean, it was well received. Oh, yeah. Obviously, I mean they made a hit movie out of it, and like I think it was Mark Millar's first creator-owned work. or one of the first
It
major
was
ones
it
that really.
was the stuff that was all coming out around the same time. Because
But
I
I mean,
remember he did like a drop where it was like this publisher,
yeah,
this publisher had
Kick
it, you
Ass.
know?
He did Kick Ass and Wanted and a bunch of stuff. But I mean, that's really when he started to land as a creator. And I think a lot of it did start with Wanted. I mean, yeah, he was already a hit maker when he was writing the Ultimates and
Hmm.
Ultimate X-Men. But I think as that the master of like the executing the high concept idea that he is probably started with this. You know, like
Hmm.
because this is like one of those high concepts that you're like, duh, why didn't anyone think of this? But
It
like
is
any other
really good.
concept, yeah, it can't really just hinge on whether it's a good concept or not. You know, it's got to be well written, executed well. You know, and Mark does that great. I mean, the art
It's
in this was the perfect matching again. You know, like
Oh, it's so good. I love JG Jones, and he doesn't do enough interior work, you know. And I will mention this. Okay, so like I said, the killer, right? Spoiler alert. I'm just gonna say it so that we can get it out of the way. He is Wesley's dad, and this is the
yeah,
reason why we're even seeing him. And he's in this, this scenario, and he gets attacked. He's getting shot through by snipers. And I will read this line because this line fucking made me laugh out loud. This whole book made me laugh out loud multiple
yeah.
times. He's like, can a man even aspire to an orgasm without getting shot at these days? And then he just jumps out the window. And I don't know why, but it reminds me of the comedian a
Did
little
you
bit.
notice the socks he's wearing when he's running down the side of the building?
Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Little details like that I had forgotten or maybe hadn't even noticed the first time I read it. So like it's interesting that that's in there because that's already a little clue as to what like how did he get those? Like now when you put it in the context with what happens,
Yeah.
it's clever, man. It's like Mark's a very clever writer. I also
Did,
want to mention that I think it was on purpose because it was mentioned at the time, but Wesley is made to look like Eminem in this
yeah, I was
a
gonna
little bit.
mention it. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people wanted him to be Eminem in the movie, remember? I remember
yeah, and
people
I
doing
think
it.
Mark envisioned it too. Obviously he's the one that sort of like wanted him to resemble Eminem with obviously like the Fox to me looks like Halle Berry. I think it was a very conscious decision to make them resemble famous people to give the book a certain feel.
Yeah, I can't remember. There's another character in here that when I was reading it this time that I didn't pick up the first time. I did pick up those two actors,
Yeah.
or well, Eminem's not an actor, but I did pick up those two, celebrities as the people for the, Wesley and the Fox. But there's Nicolas Cage person in here, and I can't remember. I think it's Johnny Two Dicks, but he
Dude, I
looks
was
like
gonna say, dude, I had forgotten about Johnny Two Dicks and
so
like
did I. And that's like
if
it's like
you haven't read it,
ventriloquist.
basically it's a ventriloquist, but instead of like a ventriloquist dummy, it's his fucking. He's got a second dick, right?
And
Or is it
yeah,
just
and
a,
no, it's a second one, and you never see it. You just see the fucking word balloon coming from his crotch.
so that the fucking dick is like this gangster lord like talking out of his fucking pants?
Yeah, yeah, it's hilarious, dude. But
And
so
I love how dejected he draws like Johnny Two Dicks, like always looking down, like fuck, bro, like literally being driven by his dick. Again, man, fucking funny stuff,
oh,
but
I
you can
know.
already tell what kind of a vibe this book is gonna have. So if you don't like any of that kind of humor, you probably aren't gonna like this.
Yeah, and then follow like things pick up very fast. And this is
Yeah,
a
I
very
forgot how fast it gets going. Like it wastes no time in getting Wesley into the fraternity and having him already like being a badass. Like
but I feel like all first issues that he does are like that. I don't feel like any of his first issues don't like. I mean, that's not to say that all of them are this quick in terms of getting to the story, but I feel like he does a great job of all first issues that he drops. Like he gives you everything you need. Not necessarily is it going to have a ton of information or a ton of things happen, but
But you get everything you need, yeah,
yeah,
and he gets you in the story right away, which is like a very important
right.
aspect of comic book writing because so many first issues like feel like they're so bogged down by exposition or introduction, and he does that. I mean, like you said, in those first 2 pages, you got the opening splash. You got those first 2 pages telling you who Wesley Gibson is. Like you get everything you need to sort of really sort of understand the trajectory the character goes through with the rest of the story. You don't need more than those 2 pages. Whereas I feel like other writers would have spent an entire issue setting that up.
A lot of writers at this time period would have
Yeah,
done a lot because this was an era of like super deconstructed storytelling, and not
Yeah, where like everything was stretched out. You know what I
the
mean? Like,
Bendis era.
yeah,
You
which I
know?
mean, no, not I love that stuff at the time, but like
Same.
you start to realize that Mark's doing something different, and like he's writing comic books, and he knows.
He doesn't follow trends. Do you notice
No,
that?
he sets them kind of in a
He
weird way.
either sets them, or he just like inadvertently, or he just does his own thing. Like even
Yeah,
now the comics he's putting out, like they're not they're not similar. They're not following any kind of trend of the market. You know, he just
no,
does what he wants to do. And sometimes that's setting the, and then somehow it'll set the trend or it's just going against. And I love that about his stuff. This dates itself in a couple moments, and I can't remember right now off top of my head. I just remember when I was reading it, there was comments in here where I'm like, okay, this is definitely a product of its time. I love, like obviously the killer gets killed, right? I'm just gonna try to jump forward so we can get into more
yeah,
of the meat of the story. And you got all these other villains discussing it, like where's the money gonna go? Oh, it's gonna go to her, or no, he had a kid. And then immediately, you don't even need to be told. You realize, like, if you didn't know the plot of the story, you're like, okay, so it has to be that dude, right? It's Wesley.
yeah,
Again, we get a few more panels of Wesley just being a fucking loser. His girlfriend just like, God, she's such a bitch, and then he's getting a fucking coffee, or he's getting his stupid salmon, sesame crusted salmon sandwich with wasabi mayo, which I just thought was like such a funny thing because he's trying to be different.
yeah,
And then Fox comes in, and I love the way she talks down to him, and he just kind of takes it. Like he tries to a little bit stand up to her, but then she just starts going fucking killing people in this cafe. From there, like this is where this is where he looks like Eminem the most, is when he's wearing the beanie. I like, if you didn't see these opening pages with the beanie, I don't think that anybody would make the correlation to him looking like Eminem necessarily. But after moving forward, yeah. And then like you get a little hint of like this doll man guy, or doll master, right?
Lawmaster, yeah,
And being reassigned to security because he picked up hepatitis B during a smash and grab on Earth 594. Like just like little things like that. And you're already talking about multiverse at this point. And
yeah,
there's a lot of deep cuts for comic book fans that, like, if you're reading it and this is like maybe your first comic, like these are things maybe you wouldn't notice, like the Spider-Man boots, like you pointed out, right? And seeing like an amalgamation of like Bizarro in there, seeing an amalgamation of like what I considered like a Lex Luthor, Dr. Savannah,
yeah,
Savannah.
with a professor.
Yeah. But they tell him what's up. Your dad had fucking, he was the world's best killer. He was my fucking bodyguard. He had millions of dollars. It's all yours now.
Yeah,
But the
basically,
caveat,
the killer is like a dead shot, or like a Slade Wilson. You know what I mean? Like or maybe even like a bullseye. Like that kind of a.
but yes, but his personality's not.
No, no. I'm just saying, like the archetype of the character.
But yes,
Like
like,
a costumed hitman, so to speak.
and I love it. Like, what do they tell him to do? Like, they hand him a gun, and you have to shoot these flies that have been bothering me all day. They hand him the gun, and he doesn't. He just grabs it, shoots, and all 5 or 6 flies are just. He shoots the wings off them, and he
Yeah,
doesn't even
without
know.
trying.
And it ends in such a good way. It's like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? And Professor's like, isn't it obvious? The answer to all your problems. He's still, and then we, progressively, like, we get to see, like, Fox is like, all right, you had your 24 hours. They give him 24 hours to decide, what are you going to do? She tells it just to stand up. First of all, there's a comment about the boss that definitely I don't think would fly nowadays, or
No,
people
yeah.
would have a problem with. I don't see a problem with it. Whatever.
I think it's just. I mean, I understand why it's written the way it is, because you're supposed to see Wesley a certain way. Like we said it at the beginning, like he's not really a likable character, and nor does he really become one. Like
Yeah.
the self actualization that he achieves in this is not necessarily a positive one. Like he's embracing being a supervillain, but that going into the story. You're not. It's not one of these stories where the character has a change of heart and like decides to
No.
like do good and reclaim and undo the evil his father did, or any of that stuff. No, Wesley is just as bad, if not worse, than his father.
Oh yeah,
Probably
dude.
worse because he was such a an embittered like man child before all of this happened to him. Like
Yeah, as he's later called, he's a fucking raised to be a fucking little pussy by his mom,
yeah,
and yeah, so you get his training and stuff, how they're trying to teach him like to be okay with watching like flesh splinter off of a body, so they get a bunch of dead bodies for him to shoot at. They make him fucking go into a
a
slaughterhouse.
slaughterhouse and like kill cows and like like basically commit these violent atrocities to make sure that like he's not gonna freak out the first time he has to kill someone. And Wesley takes it very well. Like he was, it was almost like he was intended for this, which he obviously was.
Yeah, and then he fucking, he gets tortured. He finally sticks up for himself, fucking breaks a splintered off chair and shoves it into that dude's fucking head. And then,
Yeah,
he gets his little suit, 3-piece suit, and he goes out to the into the fucking hood, and he goes and starts talking shit to fucking
yeah. So
some
the
people.
guys that used to follow him off the bus and like
Yeah.
call him names, he fucking fights them all.
And it's crazy too, because what is such a subtle thing, but you're not going to notice it unless you're really paying attention, is the change in Wesley's face. Not only does he cut his
Yeah,
hair, which makes him look different, but the cockiness and confidence in his face that he
yeah.
has post all this shit of, his quote unquote his training. It's such a noticeable difference.
The body
He
language is different. The way
yeah.
that JG Jones draws him, like the way he stands. He's standing much more like straight.
And when he goes and he tells his girlfriend, like, oh yeah, I fucking killed him. I fucking threw him in the dumpster in pieces.
Yeah,
And then that old guy sitting on the stoop that would always like say these like, oh, it's gonna get better,
sure. I was, but yeah, he's like,
just fucking blows him away, dude. And oh man, dude, it's just, I mean, look at that. Like I said, he's like, fuck my mom for raising me to be such a fucking pussy. Fuck everybody. And then he
fuck the
speeds
job,
off.
fuck the yeah. And
And
then
then
you
we
get that great. I love that scene where he's being inducted into
inducted
the
into the fraternity.
fraternity. And
Yeah.
like you've got like all the amalgamations of different characters. Like you can see like a Brainiac there, fucking either Flaming Skull or Ghost Rider in the background. Like you
Well,
see
that's a
the
straight
imp.
up Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze. That's not even an amalgamation. That he just straight up puts
Yeah,
them
I
in
was
there.
gonna say that looks like Breeze for sure.
But yeah, it's great, dude. He gets his fucking suit, and I just think it's so funny how he talks about himself. He's like, "In my dad's old spandex, so fucking handsome. If I was chocolate, I swear I'd eat myself right now." It's so stupid, but it's so funny.
And here we meet Mr. Rictus, who's like the villain of the piece. I really like that character a lot, Mr. Rictus. Like he's sort of like the Joker, I guess.
He's
You
like the
know?
Joker, but I would almost say he's like, I don't want to say smarter. I think he's like just a touch more sadistic and evil.
Yeah, and I
That
love his
he's more
origin. That
terrifying.
he was like this preacher slash like priest that like died and instead of like going into the afterlife, he realized that like life was meaningless. There was like
Yeah.
nothingness in that brief moment that he died. So he became like the opposite of what he was. It's a cool character and a cool origin, and he makes for a good antagonist because it's interesting that all the characters in this are villains. There's like all the superheroes were gone. They were taken care of by all the villains in 1986. In an event that you don't get too many details on.
Which is interesting because I've heard people say that this is like that. I was reading recently. I don't know. I think it's really weird, like that you and I like we interviewed Mark. We've been talking about his books. We decided we are going to do some more books, and I've started to see other people randomly talk about the
Yeah,
rest of the line, and it just like it tripped me out. And I saw a comment recently, supposedly 1985 was tied into this. When we talked about, because we talked about 19.
I think everything was supposed to be tied somehow. Especially with like the multiverse aspect of 1985. I think was probably the key.
Because look, I mean, multiverse. Why couldn't this be tied into some like overall multiverse
Yeah,
of comic books? Like I'm like DC even has like their Marvel Earth.
yeah.
Like that they don't call their Marvel Earth, but it is. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting that somebody said that, and I love the Superman analog that's like in an old folks home, because like when they did that to the planet, they erased their memories. And there's also
Yeah,
that scene later with the Batman and Robin of this world, and how they got relegated to just being TV stars, and like they didn't.
playing. They think they played the characters. Yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I love stuff like this when they do these analogs of stuff and put them in situations that would never happen at Marvel and DC ever, you know? He's at one point he even sends Wesley to another Earth to fucking get something for him, and it's like they don't call it, but it's a kryptonite condom.
And the professor also has Superman's cape essentially, like
Yeah,
as a memento. Like the only thing left. I think it's now probably a good moment to mention too. I mean, again, spoiler, but if you haven't really been paying attention to the stuff that Mark Millar is doing now, he's got this big crossover coming out in July called Big Game, which is tying all his properties together. And what you found out in the most recent issue of the Nemesis Reloaded is that it's all going back to Wanted. So like basically, Big Game is about the fraternity now coming to really start shit
yeah,
and going after like the heroes that are starting to pop up again, like the ambassadors. So it's a good time to be reading Wanted because it's gonna come back to the zeitgeist over the summer, I think, in a big way. And I see a lot of chatter about this crossover, and I think it's gonna bring a lot of interest back to some of these Mark Millar properties that were huge because people forget like Wanted hit like a ton of bricks when it came out. Like it was a
oh
hit series. It was
yes,
fucking promoted everywhere. It was news when this was coming out, when Kick-Ass was coming out. Like you would see full page ads in like the in Wizard and Hero Illustrated and all those magazines that were being published back then.
oh yeah, dude. I mean I remember. I mean I'm trying to think about what
There
year.
was a lot of hype behind this, and like, I mean, I think the movie rights had even been sold. So in a lot of ways, like the Mark Millar like hype train started with this book and this period, where he really started coming out with those Mark Millar ideas that we all know and love.
Yeah,
So if you've been curious about Mark or haven't really read any of his works, like this might be one to give you an idea of what to expect, and one that is probably one of his best ones too.
I won't, we don't have to ruin some of the stuff that happens at the end, but like the whole gist of this book, after you learn of Wesley, is now the heads of the family, are divided, right? Like
Right.
you said, Mr. Rictus and I think, what is he called? Future? Is that his name?
Future, yeah.
Future. He's like a Nazi fucking like time traveling fucking type guy, right? Like he's like a doctor. What's that? The name from JSA? Fuck, I can't remember him.
Oh, per
Degaton?
Degaton.
For Degaton.
Yeah,
So he's like
yeah.
that kind of character, but fucking just completely way more evil.
Then
But
you have Adam One,
Adam,
like
yeah. And they want to they're tired, they're bored, because basically what we didn't mention also is the fraternity, if you're part of it, you can do whatever the fuck you want and nothing will happen. So they can go into broad daylight, murder people, and they won't be
it just
touched.
gets covered up by the
Exactly.
media, by the cops. Like they all have like an understanding. Like it's a clever idea, which like allows him to get away with like all the crazy shit that
Yeah.
that happens in this. Like where otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. And so like now that they're divided, they want to take over, or they don't want to take over. They want more action. They want to be known. They want to
Yeah,
do
they
some
figure
crazy
like,
shit.
look, why are we even like we have all this power? Like, why are we even pretending? Like, why cover it up if nothing's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Like why don't we just do whatever the fuck we want? Like
And then they start taking people out, that we've met. And like Wesley, the seeds have been planted. They're like, oh, the fox is the one that killed your dad. And then, now they're going after Wesley. So like there's all this, like all these different things, all these happening at the same time. Eventually we get to a point where like some of the heads they're getting, like you said, they're getting taken out, and Mr. Richter is gonna fucking, he's going to
yeah,
get what he wants. And that's where we saw that scene where they had like, Batman and Robin trust like tied up and shit. And what they don't take into account is Wesley is just as good as his dad, and they can't take him out that easily. So now he's going after them. and I don't want to spoil. It's basically I don't want to spoil the last issue. So something happens, something very unexpected that I didn't see, and even rereading it, like I remembered that it happened, but I couldn't. I don't actually, what, to be honest with you, I don't think I read the last issue. I don't think I ever had issue 6 because this came out right after I graduated high school. And I think like there was that like in between where I missed a couple things.
Yeah.
And so getting to read the ending, like as I was reading it, I know I didn't have that previously. I only had the first 5, but yeah, it sets up an interesting, meeting between between Wesley and somebody that I thought was pretty cool. And it definitely, like, knowing what you were talking about, because you spoiled Nemesis Reload. I didn't read it. I asked you to tell me what happened at the end because I didn't want to wait. And so knowing that now, it's pretty crazy to see how, like, were some of these seeds planted purposely by Mark?
That's a question. I mean, I know when we interviewed Mark, he mentioned that, to hit him up when Big Game comes out. That's definitely something I want to ask him. Like, how far back were these seeds planted? Because I mean, it could be happenstance, but it does seem that those seeds were always there for him to pick up if he wanted to. And I wouldn't put it past him. Mark's clever, and he's great at setting up all his chess pieces when he's trying to execute something. So,
but yeah, this
like
is
I said, it's probably like one of my favorites of his works. It reads very quickly. I mean, I reread this thing in one sitting, and not because I felt like I had to, but more because I wanted to. Like it just reads very well. He's always been so good at pacing, and this thing is excellently paced. The art by JG Jones is gorgeous. It like you said, there's a few things that make it dated, but otherwise, like it still feels pretty modern.
It's
Again,
mostly just there's a comment or something. It get mentioned
yeah,
something that's
like a
very,
reference, and
yeah,
we said earlier, go into this knowing that you're following a character whose point is to offend. Like he's not a likable character. There's a lot of very like gallows, like lowbrow humor in this, but that doesn't mean that it's dumb. People
yeah,
always confuse lowbrow and gallows humor is dumb. No, you can have smart fart jokes. Like this book has them. Like
yeah.
so that's the kind of attitude, but well written. I mean, obviously it's going to come back in a big way over the summer with all the big game stuff, and I'm glad, man. I'm glad that we ended up doing these Miller pieces because I've been wanting to reread a lot of his work. He was such an important writer at a time when I was getting back into comics, and these books at the time were like, were headline making, man. I mean, everybody was talking about them.
Yeah.
This
No,
was
it's
career. I mean, career making work for Millar, for JG Jones. It brought him a whole new like set of eyes looking at his work. It's a great series, an evergreen series, a classic series, and I love it, man. I'm glad we did it because I've been wanting to revisit it for so long.
same. Yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. And definitely go pick it up. Make sure like you stay tuned for some more Mark Millar stuff. We're going to be doing some stuff leading up to Big
Yeah, it's
Game.
gonna be his summer, man. I mean, there's a lot going on with his line of books.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. Yeah, we got a couple of episodes coming.
Hell yeah. And make sure you follow us. Our links are down below. And make sure you hit the subscribe button, the bell icon, so you're notified every time a new vid goes up. And on that note, we're out.